Pulse School on RealAgriculture.com is brought to you by BASF.
I'm Nick Syke, and today I found myself in Calgary at BASF talking to McKnight. We got into the ins and outs of herbicide stacking. Really interesting conversation. Let's get right into it.
So basically, herbicide layering is utilizing multiple herbicide passes to manage difficult weeds on your farm.
Okay. And what does that look like in terms of technicality for a farmer? They're loading up different tanks and going over it once at a time?
Yeah, so for instance, you might be talking about multiple passes in a season. That's basically what you're going to do with herbicide layering. So, in the springtime, you'd probably be using hopefully a residual herbicide if you can, and then you're going to plan your in-crop application and perhaps maybe even a post-harvest, depending on how hard the weed is to control. And realistically, your plan is based around your toughest driver weed, is what I would say. So maybe it's wild oats for you, it might be cleavers, it might be kochia, but whatever the most difficult to control weed is for you, that's probably what you're going to build your layering program around.
Okay. So practically speaking, how is this different in philosophy or difference in strategy from straight tank mixing, say?
In reality, it's really not. So tank mixing is for sure a part of your herbicide layering strategy. So, in the spring, let's just use wild oats for instance. You're growing a pulse crop. You might be using a group 15 mixed with glyphosate in the spring, and another burn down herbicide probably. And so hopefully you limit that wild oats population for your in-crop application, which because it's pulses, is probably a 2 and a 1 mixed together. So we do have multiple modes of action there as long as we have no resistance. And then in the fall, you might be also tank mixing more herbicides. So you have 3 herbicide applications there, and hopefully, if you can, you're actually tank mixing different modes of action as well.
So tank mixing in there while doing the layering.
While doing the layering, right?
Gotcha.
Yeah.
So that's quite technical. There's a lot of different chemistries there to consider. How does this typically fit into a weed management strategy? Like, how do you see this implemented on farms in this area?
Yeah, that's a good question. So, first of all, depending on the crop, you may only have certain herbicide options, and so that kind of limits the available chemistries that you can have. So, the idea is that it fits in, as best as you can. You're going to rotate as many modes of action and chemistries that you can, and it also builds into your other crop years. So, specifically talking about pulses, we want to do a really good job of controlling a weed like kochia in years that we can use, products other than group 2s, right? So that's super important. So it's kind of a multi-year strategy, and we want to layer in as many herbicides as we can.
Well, that makes sense. Does this reduce selection pressure substantially?
So every time you apply a herbicide, you're going to have selection pressure. So that's the honest truth. But what you do is you kind of eliminate the stacking up of selection pressures, perhaps. So let's use Edge or a group 15 for instance. So you apply that in the spring. Hopefully you lower the population of weeds that will emerge for your in-crop application of wild oats for instance, and so you're going to try and eliminate the amount of stacking up of different selection pressures. So if you're just planning on one in-crop application to control those wild oats, then you have your one selection pressure there, and you might stack those up year over year. Whereas with a layering program, hopefully you're not going to continually select with one chemistry. You're going to kind of multiply those applications across different groups.
So as much as possible, we're giving a particular group a bit of a break there.
For sure. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that makes sense. Is it more important or difficult in pulse crops specifically than in other types? Is there a favorability here?
Yeah, so it's kind of both, right? Like pulse crops, especially when we're talking lentils, right? We're kind of tied to the group 2 chemistries in crop. Peas as well. Maybe we have products that we can use group 6s there too. But with pulse crops, it's for sure important as well as difficult. So we got to find different products we can use in the spring, residual herbicides, hopefully to limit the amount of weeds that we have, putting selection pressure on that in-crop herbicide. So for sure, it's probably more important in pulse crops and also more difficult in certain respects as well, just because of the limited amount of chemistries we have to work with. So yeah.
Right. That makes sense. Yeah. So talking about the benefits there, I think we understand that we're giving each group a bit of a bump there in its potential to be effective long term. Mm-hmm. What are some of the drawbacks to using multiple modes of action at one time?
So, good question. I don't know that there's necessarily any drawbacks, but I think the key point would be is that if you're using, you could use your multiple mode of action product, and if you're using it one time every year to control that specific driver weed, the drawback there would be that we're just having that one selection pressure event year over year, as I mentioned before, stacking it all together. So there really is, the drawbacks there would be that we have that one application. So when it comes to the layering program, we do want to be mixing in multiple modes of action where we can, but we also want to stack up those applications to continually control that specific weed we're worried about.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Is there any hesitation that you see in the industry about adopting herbicide layering, or is it something that you're seeing quite a bit of success with, something that's adopted by farmers right away?
Yeah, I think it's being adopted by growers. We see there's been a huge uptick in fall residual herbicides and pulse crops, for instance, especially. And so, growers there are going after kochia, most likely. They're putting in a group 15 for kochia and wild oats and that type of thing. I would say that the biggest drawback to get people to sign on board is most likely has a lot to do with the costs involved, for sure. But I think, there's a lot of benefits. So, Chris Willenberg has done a lot of research at the U of S and showing that we actually see some yield bumps with specific crops, canola specifically with some of the work that they did, but we did see yield increases when we do a layering program. And so that might not be something as a grower that you see specifically because you're applying a herbicide across your entire field, right? But we are seeing yield bumps there too, so hopefully the cost isn't a total concern for growers, but we are seeing a pretty big uptick in what we'd consider layering programs, for sure.
Well, I suppose the inverse side to the cost is that it's very tough to calculate the cost of resistance with a full group of herbicides, right? So
yeah, exactly. Yeah, there's for sure a cost to resistance, and whether it's yield losses because of competition due to those weeds, or maybe it's even harvest losses in terms of we have weed seeds in the crop that we're trying to sell, so we're getting dockage reductions, that type of thing. So there's for sure a cost to resistance. So if we spend a little bit more money up front in a herbicide program, hopefully we can maybe outweigh those costs that are there.
Sure. Does BASF have any available resources for farmers to learn more about herbicide layering?
Yeah, for sure. We have a program we call Advanced Weed Control. So, basically it would be our herbicide layering program for pulse crops, and we have it for canola as well. And so we do have a lot of resources on the website around that one, and so it kind of has a lot of information about our pre-seed herbicide options and what the recommendations would be. And then on the back end we do have some kind of weed control support guarantees there as well, which is kind of cool for growers. But yeah, I would say, if you're someone in the field talking to one of our sales reps and our tech service people, they're super knowledgeable when it comes to some of this stuff as well.
Oh, wonderful. That's great to have a resource to learn more about this. Sean McKnight, thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you. Yeah, it was awesome.
Right. We'll talk to you again. Well, thanks for catching another installment of Pulse School, brought to you by BASF. I'm Nick Syke, and we'll see you again soon on RealAgriculture.com.